So we had finished the Ichha Sakti Ruma Kumari or Ichha Sakti Tama Kumari. We were discussing about the yogi who sort of ascends to a very high level of self-realization and enlightenment. And what are the stages we had discussed in the verse number, the sutra number 12, Vishmayo Yoga Bhumikaha. And these are, let's remember, these are all starting with Udyama Bhairava, that once a person is doing that effort, is verily established in that consciousness of the Supreme Being, which means that the emphasis is laid on the universal aspect of one's consciousness. When the individualized self-consciousness transcends the individuality in itself, or ceases to see itself as a tiny, limited human consciousness, more and more it is able to look at the whole universe, look at oneself as part of that global or cosmic eye consciousness. And then what are the things that happen on the way? These are the things we have discussed. It says that there is a relentless, endless sense of wonder that he experiences when he ascends. Vishmayo Yoga Bhumika. And then we said that Ichha Sakti Ruma Kumari. That person no more desires anything, aspires for anything as an individual, but because he is in that highest level of awareness, whatever he wills happens. He doesn't strive for it because his will is no more any different from the will of the Supreme Lord, the Paramashiva. That is what we had discussed in the verse number 13. Now, what are the other things that happens to a person who has ascended to that plane? That is what is discussed in the verse number 14. It's a short sutra. The explanations are very limited, and we'll dwell on it because it's a very beautiful sutra for two reasons. It has a lot of similarity with the Vedantic uh, the Vedantic discussion regarding the state of Jivan Mukti that we discussed in the Jivan, the Viveka Chudamani that we discussed. What happens to a person who has already reached that level, the summit of realization, how he experiences, how he's able to be in samsara. A lot of discussion about what is the state of a Sthita Pragya, for example, in Bhagavad Gita. I think verse number 56 of the second chapter until the end. Sthita Pragyasya ka bhasa. Bhagavan mentions how that happens, how he manifests, how he behaves, how he is established in samadhi, how he reconnects with the world, how he returns to that state again. All that we have discussed in Bhagavad Gita. And therefore, this particular sutra, even though very short, is a very powerful sutra. It is talking about a state of self-realization and what is the value of it. Because in the state of self-realization, if we look at what happens, we can aspire for it. That is, as we had discussed earlier, whatever is the lakshana or an attribute or a marking of a self-realized person is the sadhana, the goal of our sadhana. Whatever is a lakshana there, that is the subject of our sadhana. We will try to reach there. That is our sadhya. That is a lakshana for the self-realized, that describes the self-realized. For us, that is the sadhya. That is what we aim to achieve. So, drishyam sariram, what does it mean in simple terms? The body is an object of perception. Drishyam sariram. Now, there are different ways you can look at it, but we will be going through some of the Sanskrit commentaries which seek to unravel this. Okay, so what it means to say that the body is an object of perception. One thing comes very clearly to the mind, that he is definitely above the state of having, dehatma buddhi, that I am the body, I am thin, I am fat, I'm healthy, I'm weak, I'm not so well. There you have this body mind complex, and you have the ahankara, and you have kartritva and bhaktritva buddhi in it, as we discuss in Bhagavad Gita. And therefore, we confuse, we don't see the self as not having to do anything with this body mind complex. Bhagavan explains that in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Even earlier, again and again, he explains that the fools cannot see that. He mentions that in the 18th chapter. The self which is hiding in every body, all bodies, it hides there. Only those who are able to discriminate, in the sense they're capable of analysis, they know that Atma is not equal to the body, the mind, the emotions. It's Panchokoshatita. So, as per the sutras, the one who has captured the secret, he would be able to make sense of what it means to talk about Atma. Others will be in the samsara, because the discussion over there was that why some people will suffer the phala of papa punya, why some people, very few people, shall not suffer it, because they will not suffer it because they are not having that kartritva bhaktritva buddhi. Whatever is happening through them, because of the local situation of their life conditions, they may be doing something, but they are never affected by that because of the lack of agency. They do not have this identification with the body, identification with their emotions, identification with their activities. And doing all that, he's saying, Guna Guneshu Vartanta iti matva na sajjate. That's what Bhagavan said there. That you have the indriyas and there are certain vishayas and they connect with them, but you are a witness. Your eyes are seeing something, your ears are listening to something, your mind is responding, but you, while doing everything yourself, you are, of course, doing. You're going to the office, you're working, you're coming home, you're taking care of your family, you're meeting your friends, taking a walk. You're doing all that, but you're not losing your self consciousness. What kind of self consciousness? The individual self consciousness? No. You are not losing that consciousness of the self, which is the greater self, which is the universal self, that great I consciousness. So it's the macro micro level. It's a two level thing, where at one level you are at a particular limited space and doing several things, and then at the same time you're connected with the highest level of consciousness. Sri Aurobindo very beautifully mentions that in his commentaries on Upanishads, that you have that, he uses that word again and again. It's called the fragmented separative ego, with which you are entering into this world of material existence, material relations. Material includes human relations. Even though we say that intellectual relations, emotional relations, these are not material. No, they're part of the material world. Our emotions and all that are anatma. And then, of course, there is this Akshara Brahman that you have. He's saying that when you are able to link up your participation in this limited scope of your life with the universal consciousness, then you are able to achieve a integrated vision of life. You can live in this world, not rejected, and yet you shall remain connected with that divine consciousness. Then you have a grand, unified vision of your life. That is the basic difference between an intellectual mind and a spiritual mind. An intellectual mind will sort of analyze, fragment things. This is politics, this is economics, this is house, this, that. They will mention all that. But the person who is spiritually inclined, he connects everything. This whole thing, it's like a ladder. At one level, he's in the sansara doing things. At another level, is connected with the Supreme Being. How that works out is explained in the sutra, Drishyam Sariram. So let's look at the commentary. Yasya Yoganishta Purushasya. That Yoganishta Purusha, that person who is established in yoga, in Bhagavad Gita language, will be Yoga Rudha at a very highest level. Idrisi Mahecha Jayate. he has aspiration, because he's mentioned earlier Ichha Sakti Ruma Kumari. In the previous sutra, we have seen it. So he's explaining that Idrishi Mahecha, not a normal human aspiration, Mahecha, Maha Icha, that superior, supreme desire, not desire but aspiration, that dynamism, that volition. Tasya samagram bahyam bahya bhyantaratmakam. So it's not about only external reality or external world. It's about both internal and external world. Remember that whole samsara. We are not only looking at the external material reality. That's why I mentioned that emotions and thoughts and interactions, everything will come into this purview of what is samsara and what is drishya. Whatever you see is drishya. Whatever you make sense of is drishya. Because you are the drashta, you are the drik chaitanya, you are the perceiver. Whatever is perceived is drishya. Your swapna is drishya. Your thoughts, your actions, your analysis, everything is drishya. So in samagram, bahya bhyantaratmakam, drishya bhutam, whatever is in the perceived category, bastu swaswarupa rupam eva bhavati iti sutra dwara nirdisati. Now, there is a beautiful technique of interpretation here, and they call it how do you make sense of it? Hmm? The problems of interpretation, they call it. Hermeneutic take on this is that one is, you will say drishyam sariram, then you just reverse it, sariram drishyam. There are two words, sariram drishyam. The world, the body is an object of perception. The object of perception is the body. There are two different sentences now. Let's look at it. Beautifully explained. First way of interpretation, which Kshemaraja will also say, this person is expanding on Kshemaraja's theory. We will go there. Nirdisati drishyam shariram. And what is that drishyam shariram? That is the first style of interpretation, first way to interpret it. Yad yad drishyam yasmin jagati vartate. Whatever image you see in the sansara, outside of you, your brothers, your sisters, your wife, your family, your workers, this whole, the whole natural system, the human system, the economic system, whatever you're looking at it. Yasmin jagati vartate tad vahyam syad abhyantaram va syad. It could be external, it could be internal. Tat tad samagram api, and all that, both what is external and internal. Aham idamiti sada siva iva mahaprakasha patya. Very beautiful. Like Siva would say, because you see, this whole sansara, a secret is here. This whole sansara, according to Advaita Vedanta, is an inverted projection of Brahman because of avidya or ajnana. Right? Here it's not because of avidya and ajnana, but the whole sansara looks inverted because of ajnana, which has come to us, and how it came. It's not which is happening on its own like in Vedanta, but he's saying now Lord Shiva, the supreme divine force, has Swatyantira Shakti. It has the five Shaktis, and what are these? You have that Chit Shakti, Ananda Shakti, and Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Ichha Shakti. So the supreme divine, because you have all that at the supreme level, so what happens is that there is a kind of inversion takes place when this Shakti of the supreme Shiva, that Shiva consciousness, that Shakti turns into Maya. Bheda becomes available to your consciousness. And then these five Shaktis of Paramashiva they turn into Pancha Kanchukatva of that Shakti, that Maya Shakti. Veiling power, fivefold veils. And we have discussed that many times before. How, whatever is that Chit Shakti, which is Sarva Vyapaka, becomes Niyati, limitation. Jnana Shakti will become Vidya, limited. Right? So Kriya Shakti will become Kala, limited. This is a kind of Sankocha, contraction of that supreme divine. And we have discussed that as to how the moment you manifest anything, it can only assume a limited expression of that particular emotion or desire or thought. You write a poem, you write a letter, you have a bunch of emotions, you are writing a letter to your wife or sister or brother, anyone, a friend. The bunch of emotions you have are far greater than what you can capture in words. Similarly, the divine will of the Lord, when it manifests, it assumes a very limited form. That's what he's saying, Drishyam. So he's saying, Bahyam Abhyantaram Vasya Tatta Samagram Api Aham Idam Iti Sada Siva Iva. Aham Idam. I am this. Why? Because there's no reality where the supreme consciousness doesn't pervade. Like, kindly mute yourself. Yeah. Okay. 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 Okay, so you have this satta and spurti, right? That is the most important thing. So the satta spurti which are happening here, because of because the supreme consciousness is all pervading. There is no corner of this universe where the supreme consciousness hasn't gone. And the materiality which are available to our eyes and senses, we say this is sound, this is color, this is temperature. What are these things? As per Advaita Vedanta, okay, so you have this whole prakriya, Sisti prakriya, you have Ishvara, which is Maya Upahita Chaitanya, because of Vishuddha Chaitanya, linked with Maya or Avidya, you have Ishvara, you have Jiva, and you have Sansara. That is what we have studied. So these are material manifestation of a certain wrong association or imaginary kalpita sambandha, imaginary association with Vishuddha Chaitanya, with Maya. So these things do not exist. They exist so far we are in ignorance. That is what Vedanta will tell you. And in this darshan, what they are saying, no, it's because of Swatantriya, that whole will, that divine will, that has created all this. And for what purpose they have created all this? They have created all this so that we are able to ascend from where we are in that Pasu consciousness we have to the Supreme Shiva consciousness through a process of sadhana. That's why we're doing the Siva Sutras. So he's saying, because this whole material, non-material, everything that you see as a reality, which is an object of perception, is no different from aham idam. I am this. Look at this, it's very beautiful. Drishyam sariram. Drishyam is outside you, other than you. Sariram is part of you. Like the Vedanta. Vedanti says, Sarvam Vasudevam iti. He sees everything as Brahman, everything is Vasudeva. Why? Because whatever appears on the Adhisthana is no different from Adhisthana in Vedanta. The snake is no different from the rope. Everything, what is the Adhisthana? Brahman. So the Jnani, the Jivanamukta, sees everything as Brahman appearing as human beings and countries and politics and economics, all that. Here he's saying, but here it's a beautiful thing. He's not denying the reality of the external reality. The material cosmos, whatever you're seeing, Shiva Sutra is not denying their existence. They are not calling it is just an appearance. No. This happened because of the will of the Lord. However, they're saying that that supreme consciousness of the yogi, the division between I and the world, me and the universe, that is that separative consciousness, and that vanishes. Because he assumes a consciousness where he has what kind of mentality he has? Aham idam, I am this. And this includes this whole cosmic universe, whatever you see around. I'm no different from it. Why he is able to say this? A tiny human being sitting in a corner reading Siva Sutra? No, because he doesn't have anymore the human consciousness in him. He has that Shiva consciousness. Where his will, Bhagavan says, you remember the interpretations we did, where Lord Shiva tells to Parvati, you know, when a yogi reaches there, his will is no different from my will. Whatever say, I say. And that's one of the reasons that most very self-realized people, when they say things happen, not because they have any siddhis, But because they have already renounced, they have thrown away that human consciousness, and they are in that supreme Shiva consciousness, and therefore they would not be able to say something from an individualistic point of view, but always from the universal and from that supreme consciousness point of view. So they are no different from Shiva. So Shivoham, Shivoham, you ascend to that place and you verily become that Shiva consciousness. And that is what he's saying. That idam aham idam iti sadasiva iva, as if he's Sadasiva himself. Sadasiva iva mahaprakasa pratya. All this because Lord Shiva manifests everything here. With that kind of a consciousness, what happens to him? Swanga kalapam vishwam, as if it's part of your body. This whole universe is part of you. It's not physical body, remember. He has already ascended to a place he can't even see his physical body. He's in consciousness. And therefore, he sees this whole universe not outside, not separate from, not distinguishable from that supreme consciousness, because everything has emanated from that universal supreme consciousness. And he is identifying himself with that. Swangakalpam Vishwam Swasakti Prachuyasya. Because Bhagavan's that five Saktis, the Swatantra Sakti, when it expands, it creates this whole sansara. Prachuyasya Vishwam iti Bhakshamanina, that is what is intended to be said here. Swa bhava avyatiraktam eva. Now, how we look at our consciousness. I'm a person. We are celebrating New Year today in Bengal and Orissa. So this is our New Year. You go to North India, they celebrated New Year 4-5 years back, 4-5 days back, and then you go to South India, they have another New Year. Maharashtra had a Ugadi New Year, that was again 4-5 days back. So all these people, we have certain cultural, religious identities, and some people are celebrating. Yesterday they celebrated Eid, then you celebrated your New Year today, whatever. All names and forms. I and he or she, self and other. Remember, the limited consciousness will have two keywords in it, self and other. It's a divided, fragmented, limited consciousness. So if you look at whole of Western philosophy, these two words will appear in again, self and other. Whenever you are thinking about anything, you are othering some people. You're in America, I mean, it's like you become an American. You go settle, you get a citizenship, and then what happens to you? I'm an American. These are illegal aliens. You're othering those people. One of them could be a cousin who entered the country with a visa. It has expired. He's staying on, trying to survive. You keep othering others. So the self then is individual self. Sometimes it's the self associated with your identity, with your country, with your religion, with your race, with your age group, with the economic sector where you're working, with your gender, whatever. Remember, these are all part of how you define yourself, and then you will exclude people because they're outside of what you describe as the domain of yourself. Self and other, that othering happens. For the person established in the universal Shiva consciousness, there is no other. Why? The other is also part of that Shiva consciousness. The other is also an extension because Shiva consciousness is all pervading. How do you? Tatra ko shoka ko moha ekatam anupashyataha. When you reach there and you have that ekatva, everything is one. Who is other than you? There is no other than you. So whenever you have duality, you have fear, somebody might attack me. When you see the whole conscious, the whole universe is you. That's the word in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. You have that abhaya. You have that compassion, your love for everyone because nobody is actually outside of you. That's what he's mentioning here. So Swabhava Avyatirektameva. It is not different from who you are and who you are, that Paramashiva consciousness. He's saying, Paramrishataha Prasphurati. Having realized that, it blossoms and Natu Swasariram Pruthatvena Abalokayati. My body now is a limited thing. This is me. I'm a Shiva Sutra student. I'm a sadhaka. And his guy, this is a Vaishnava, that guy is a Shakta, okay, closer to me. And that guy is a Advaita Vedanti. He doesn't recognize Shiva as the ultimate reality. He talks about a Nirguna Brahman, self and other. No. He doesn't look at himself, whether it is a physical body, is your intellectual self, you are the head of your family, your country, or whatever. That limited, fragmented consciousness he no more relates to. And then what he says, the next one is a beautiful thing. That Sarvatmaka Bhava that I mentioned. Then he's saying the second interpretation, Sariram api drishyatvena. What does he do his individual body? He has a body nevertheless. He has. So aham idam, that thing is Sarvatmaka Bhava. Then comes, how do you look at your individual body? Are you blind that you don't have a body? Oh, you have. You go to sleep, you wake up in the morning, you have to go to the bathroom, you have to wash yourself, you have to give yourself food. There's nothing like you don't exist as an individual, even though you have that Parama Shiva consciousness. Sita Pragya Sheka Bhasha, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan asks, the student asks Arjuna, how does he get into meditative mode? But what about the Bhuthana Dasa? When he's actually going for a bath, taking food, talking to friends, he's caught up in a traffic jam. All our spiritual sadhana takes a beating once we are caught up in a traffic jam in current day Indian cities where infrastructure and traffic behavior, everything is, it's terrible. Then you're caught up there. What do? All your, it goes for a toss. Then you say, hey, don't drive like that, don't honk anyone. I mean, if it's US, of course, you have much more regulated traffic movement, but in India, anything goes. What do you do there? Look what he will do. He's saying, Sariram apim drushya bhutam eva vartate. Now, Sarira at one level is relating to the whole Bahya and Abhyantara, material, emotional, intellectual, whatever world, he's saying is part of the self. Okay? So, Drishyam Sariram, where Sarira encompasses the whole universe. Now, let's look at the limited Sarira that we have. How does he look at that? The individual self, the limited self. How does the jnani, even if he exists there, he cannot deny the existence of that little self in which he's wrapped up, he's enwrapped, he's like caged in a body and a mind. How do you look at it? With all our meditation, there's a phone call and there's an urgent call that you have to go and attend to your wife and children or anything. Somebody says this has to be brought and tomorrow there's a function, there's a festival. What do? You have to rush, you have to do that. How do you handle that as a jnani? Now look at it, how he handles. He's saying, Sariram api drushya bhutam eva vartate. He looks at his own body as also an object of perception. It's drishya, drikdashya viveka. That's a beautiful book, maybe we'll do it. So drikdashya viveka is who is the drashta? Shankaracharya beautifully writes about it. The drik is that perceiver. Other than that, Drik Chaitanya, everything is in Drishya Varga and, everything is false. Drishyatvat, Swapnavat. That's the argument in Advaita Vedanta. Whatever can be seen, whatever is perceptible, whatever is other than the perceiver is not real. What is the proof? Yeah, but you look at your own dreams, you see dreams, are they real? If your dreams are not real, why do you presume that what you see in the waking state is real? No, but I see them. It's intersubjective. My dreams are mine. Your dreams are yours. They are not intersubjective. You don't see my dreams. I don't see your dreams. So why should you compare the dream state with this? The Vedanti explains it very beautifully, saying because you are stuck in that waking state of the mind, you think that's real. The way the waking state denied the validity of the dream state reality, similarly, when you ascend to the next higher level of consciousness from the waking state reality, that also get nullified, devalidated. There becomes badhita. You'll continue to see it. It's like before you know why the mirage, what is mirage all about, and you look at a beautiful lake, a few kilometers away from where you are traveling on a car on a highway in a desert area. You see a lake. Once you have studied physics, you know why it appears. Are you enamored? No. But do you cease to see the lake? No. The blue mass of water continue to appear without being the mass of water. Similarly, sansara will continue to appear as real, even though you become Atmagyani. That is the whole business of Advaita Vedanta. What he's saying, more or less the same thing. Sariram drushya bhutam eva vartate yatha niladi vastu jatam. Like you see something blue, something green. These are different attributes of certain objects. Niladivat, whether it's blue, green, anything, vastu jatam. Because, in Nyaya, so what is guna? What is a quality? Is dravya ashrayatvam. So they are always attached to some dravya. They can't exist on their own. If you say kindness, some person is kind. Can you find kindness in the air? No. Can you talk about love in the air? No. There's a lover. There's a person who is in love, and therefore you're talking about a relationship of love. You have to have two people there, or 4, 5 people there. So what happens here is saying Niladi Vastu Jatam Deha Dhi Prana Shunya Rupena Drishyam Vartate. Now this is a very critical thing here. Deha, body consciousness. Dhi, your Vijnanamaya Kosha. Prana, the dynamic self in the waking state. Your prana is also there in Sushupti. It's still active. Deha, Dhi, Prana. Okay, all three things are there. So you can say in another way that Deha means the Sthula Sarira, about which you are conscious, it's moving, and with your Sthula Indriya, you have that Bahya Indriya Sanyoga with Vishayas. That is a marker for waking state, Jagrat Avastha. Bahya Indriyas are connecting with sight. For example, music is playing and you are being able to listen, so you are waking. You are in a waking state. If music is playing but you can't listen to it, why? Okay, you are in sleep state. And then in sleep state, you have no connection. You are not making use of your sense organs, and yet you are able to listen to music, see a lot of things. Why? It's created by the mind, enjoyed by the mind, mana. That is called dream state. And then Sushupti, the buddhi and your manas and your sarira, everyone is out of service. They are out of service. Prana is still continuing. That is that prana sabda you can say is related to the Sushupti avastha. And there is a word here, now he's saying Shunya Rupena. Shunya is a very critical word here. It's not that Buddhistic understanding about the Shunya. There is a saying that the Jivatma, when what is death? Stula Sanyoga Viyoga, Stula Sarira Viyoga, Stula Sarira Sanyoga is birth, and Stula Sarira Viyoga is death. Sukshma Sarira doesn't go away. Only when you have Jnana, Atma Jnana, Sukshma Sarira will go away. That is what we have studied in Vivek Shuramani. So, in that void state here, what it means is that when we die, if you have read that book, Tibetan Book of the Dead, of course, you can listen to one of those YouTube videos where they summarize it. You don't have to read the whole book. All they're saying is that a person after his death is not going anywhere, according to their theory. There is that particular zone, that Vardo zone. So he stays there for roughly about 50, 55 days or something. And then he has a lot of deep pain and pleasure because he keeps remembering all that he has passed through during this life. Then he goes and assumes another form. And then they have a training as to how to peacefully die. That means abandon this body and be free from any anxiety or tension or trauma in that subtle state of being. Now, in the Vedika philosophies, that they say, like for example, you have the Dasaha karma. And remember, in the Dasaha karma, we have this Kira Nira offering thing. If a person dies, you will have a kind of a pot in which every day in the morning, the son of the person who has departed will put some milk, and if you love, then you can put some rabidi. If it's Eastern India, where some people put some rabidi, or you can put panchamrit and kheera and nira. You'll put some water. Why? Because that atma is in a helpless state. It's very hungry. It's moving around, watching its children, all relatives, and then every day you do this karma, and when you do those karmas, you collect some bones out of the cremation, tiny pieces of bones, and then you make a body like, you know, you spread those bones and make it look like a human body, and then you cook food, you offer, and all those rituals, anteshti kriya, you do those funeral related rituals, and then finally the body goes away on the 10th day. 11th day you do the shraddha. So these 10 days in certain schools of thought, certain quarters, are believed to be the state of the void, because he will not be able to take a birth immediately after this. But he is not in his body. He's in that stage, that transition state. It's called a void, it's shunya. So that's one of the interpretations. Lakshman, the Jew, says that shunya here means that. So what he's saying, shunya rupena drishyam vartate. So this body may be in waking state, maybe in dream state, maybe in deep sleep state, or in that transition period after, soon after the death of the physical body. Evam evi bhati natu agyanivat drashtita rupena. How does the agyani, or pasu rupena he will also mention there, how does a common man who is not enlightened look at his own body? He says, this, I am a rich man, I'm a poor man, I'm a good person, I'm a thin person, I'm a fat person. He is not being able to distinguish his consciousness from the frame in which that consciousness is limited and it's caged. So he has that avedatmaka vritti, which is a limited scope of things. That is the fragmented consciousness. That is the agyani. The Jnani doesn't have that. That's what he's saying. He is able to look at his body and everything as an object of perception. Why? Because he has ascended beyond this Panchakosha. He's not identified with the Annamaya Kosha, he's not identified with the Pranamaya Kosha, he's not identified with the Manomaya Kosha, or Vijnanamaya Kosha, or Anandamaya Kosha. He's beyond that. He is that universal Siva consciousness, and therefore he is looking down at himself and his consciousness, his body, his working state, and all states as an object of perception. That means at a very subtle state, he is identified with Paramashiva, not this limited edition of Paramashiva. We are limited editions of Paramashiva, contracted editions of Paramashiva. So he looks at it as a very limited, restricted edition of Paramashiva, and is being able to stay at that high level. So Sunya Rupena, and he's saying, Evam eva bhati natu agyanivat, like an ignorant person, drashtita rupena, I'm seeing it and this and that, arthad sarire aham bhava rupena iti rahashyam. He doesn't have that aham bhava in the sarira. The Jnani has aham bhava in this samagra vishwa. He says, all this is me. And he abandons his deep attachment to his mind, his emotions, his physical being, all that. And then it's a beautiful mantra which comes, oh, of course, that will also be mentioned by Varadaraja and Kshemaraja. He's saying, Kintu asya mahayoga nishta purushasya, that person who is established in that mahayoga, drishyam asya mahayoginaha, bahya abhyantaram sarvatra, everywhere it is inside or outside. Now he's dealing with, as object of perception, you see, the sansara has srishti vaichitriya. Somebody is a beautiful lady, somebody is a very arrogant lady, somebody is an intelligent person, somebody is a foolish person. You have srishti vaichitriya, you have animals and humans and birds, you have technological wonders, and you have primitive people living in a very difficult way. That vaichitriya is there. Now how he makes sense of it, everything has come out of Lord Shiva. That he understands. He's not flabbergasted, wonderstruck by the vaichitriya of the sansara. The vaichitriya of the sansara tortures us, fascinates us, attracts us, confounds us. So far, we are stuck up in a fragmented human consciousness. And how that Jnani looks at it, beautifully is mentioned. He's saying, Sarvatra Mayuranda Rasha Iva Abhinnataya Eva. You know, why he's giving this Mayura? Mayura is that peacock, Anda is that egg, peacock's egg. And what is there inside? Okay, you have the yolk. You have that yellow stuff inside it. the egg yolk. Is there any separate thing that this part is red or pink or blue and everything? No, it's plain yellow material, some fluid inside there, semi-solid fluid. What happens out of that small mass of semi-liquid substance inside that Mayura under Russia? You have a beautiful bird which manifests. What kind of colors it has? Oh, what a sense of wonder you have when you look at a peacock which is dancing because rains are going to come. It's wonderful, isn't it? From where it came, that limited mass of yellow colored fluid. Now is the catch here. Out of that Paramashiva consciousness, which is unified, undifferentiated, materialize this whole universe, which is differentiated, multicolored. This whole cosmos, look at the diversity, the multiplicity of this whole universe, comes out of that unified consciousness. And how's that happen? We have done that a little, we'll do a little more about it. Because how the Sakti with the Maya, the projection starts, and the expansion, the more and more the expansion of that Shakti, of the Shiva consciousness happens, the more and more the Vaichitri happen. The diversity takes shape out of a shape which is unified, which is non-differentiated. Mayura andavat, what he's saying, Mayura anda rashavat, rasa iva avinnataya eva, without any bheda. So the one becomes many. Aham bahushyam prajaya. The Vedas say, let me be many. And there is a beautiful shloka also in Varadaraja Upanishad. He's saying, why did he create it? He's saying, ekena ramate. How can you be in love when you're just one? So he created diversity. I was reading, there was a book on Islamic Sufism. Beautiful sentence in that book. The book's name is The Meaning of Man. Long back, I read some 30 years back. There's a sentence that God creates difference and diversity, and the explanation in that beautiful book was so that we recognize each other as God's creation. That is why God has given us difference and diversity. Not because he wants us to fight, not because he wants us to hate or love each other or have all kinds of problems. No, but because he wants us to recognize each other and be loyal to the Lord. Right? So he's saying that everything is avinnataya jnanam bhavati jnanam bhavati yathoktam vijnana bhairave. He's taking from Vijnana Bhairava. And what is that? Creation is not different from the creator. Creation has no existence without the creator. Creator has become the creation. Creator is not creating the universe. Like, for example, in the Dvaita Vaishnavavada, Dvaita Vedanta, there's a God, he creates this whole universe. But in Vishishta Advaita of Ramanujacharya, as we discussed, he has aprithakva siddhi, very close to the Siva Sutra, the Kashmiri Saivism. Aprithakva siddhi is what? He's supreme, he's transcendent consciousness, but he can manifest. It's Brahma Parinamavada. He can manifest. We are tiny part of his great self. But the Kashmiri Saivism is far more sophisticated. And what he's saying, Jalasya Mayoho Vanher Jwala Bhangyah Prabharavehe Mameva Bhairavasyeta Vishwa Bhangyo Vibheditaha. Now, that's a very typical Vedantic theme here we are discussing. Jalasya iva urmayaha. The waves, the ripples on the surface of an ocean, are they different from the ocean? Is the ocean different from water? Even ocean has a certain scope of its existence. You have Pacific, Indian Ocean, North Sea, South Sea, all that. Water, well, is general. So he's saying like a wave cannot be independent and separate and different from water. And then Banne Jwala, the flames, are they different from fire? The flames are different from fire? No. And then Prabha Ravehe. The rays emanating from the sun, are they different from the sun? Do they have any existence on their own? No. Mamaiva Bhairava Sieta. I am Bhairava. In Vijnana Bhairava is mentioning a person who's kind of reached that summit of self-consciousness, self-awareness. Self here is that supreme I consciousness. It's not about individual self-consciousness. Bhairava Sieta Vishwabhangyo Vibhedita. That which appears to be multiple and diverse, they are manifestations of my own consciousness. Tathacha Ahu, see Vasugupta. Vasugupta Padaha. Vasugupta has written that Spandakarika. He's saying Spandakarikayam. He has given his commentary there. And what is he saying here? It's beautiful. He's saying, Yasmat Sarvamayo Jivaha Sarvabhava Samudbhavat Tat Sambedana Rupena Tadatmya Pratipattitaha Tena Sabdartha Chintashu Na Savasta Na Yah Shivaha Bhokteva Bhogya Bhavena Sada Sarvatra Sangshistaha. This is a beautiful, the last line is most important. Yasma Sarvamaya Jivaha. Whatever you see all around, Sarva Bhava Samudbhavat Tat Sambedana Rupena Tadatmya Pratipattitaha. What he's trying to say is how the Bhokta becomes Bhogya. We have a Bhokta, Bhagavan creates, Jiva is the Bhokta. Ishwara is Shashta. Okay? He's the Karta, then there's this Bhokta, Jiva, and for him, you need some Bhogya. You created a Jiva, what will he eat? It goes to the Supreme, says, Mere liye khana kuch banaye. What is there for me to eat? So he creates this whole samsara. Bhogya is whatever we receive through our sense organs, whether it's food or nature, anything that we relate to is bhogya, the external reality. Even our own thoughts and all, they are bhogya. Bhogya is not about eating. It's about whatever you connect with. So, bhokta bhogya rupena, bhokteva bhogya rupena, bhogya bhavena, sada sarvatra samsthitaha. We have no independent existence outside, independent of Paramashiva. He is the actual bhokta, that I consciousness. He has become bhogya here. There is no distinction. Itiva yasya sambittihi kridatvena akhilam jagat. This whole sansara is like a game. He's a witness. He's participating in it. Sapashyan satatam yukta jivana mukto nasankshaya. The person who is able to establish himself in that supreme state of consciousness, where he looks at this whole sansara as Leela of the Supreme Shiva. By the way, he is no more different from Supreme Shiva. During the Saktopaya or Anabopaya, the devotee worships Lord Shiva. Like, for example, we are doing Navaratri, we are praying to the Mother Divine. But Thakur Ramakrishna Paramahansa, he did worship Mother Divine. But very often he didn't see himself as different from Ma Kali. He was no different. That is what he's saying. And then, Ayam eva nishkarsaha, finally he sort of concludes it. It's a beautiful commentary. Samasta Vedya Vastu Swarupa Bhagavan Paramashiva eva. Samasta Vedya Vastu. Vedya is what you can know. Prameya. Vedya. You are the person who is seeing it. And there is something Vedya. What is Jnana? You are the Jnata. There's a process of knowing. Okay? That is the Jnana thing. And you have certain instruments of doing it, this whole pramana process. So you have a knower, process of knowing, and you have the known, and you have knowledge, jnana. So all these differences are not different from the Paramashiva. Samasta Vedyu Vastu Swarupa Bhagavana Paramashiva Eva Spatikavat. He's assuming a lot of qualities. Like you keep a crystal and you bring something red and it looks red. The Paramashiva only looks as if he has become a Pashu, he has become a Sansari, everything. We are all part of that Paramashiva, limited, restricted editions. But once we understand the limitations associated with this restrictive existence, we can ascend. Spatigavat so, and he's saying what? So pratibimbitanam, so ashrayanam, kvachite, parimita bhumikayam api. So you have something red somewhere, something blue, something green. All these colors will reflect on that crystal. The crystal doesn't assume any color of its own, but it assumes color. Similarly, this whole sansara has manifested out of that Paramashiva. And what he's saying is Bahir Antar Vidyamananam. It could be external, it could be internal. Padarthanam Sarva Vyaptitvat, because this Paramashiva consciousness is all pervading. Tat Sambit Prakasha Spurti Pradhanam. Satta and Spurti, that the Swayam Prakasa Atma gives her. Satta means our existence, Spurti means that we exist, that becomes evident. So he's saying what? Prakasha is Satta, Spurti Pradhanam, he gives it. Tad Avastha Anyatha Anupapatti Sadrupena Jivana Dasayam Api. And then even if he's in his body in a Jivana Mukta, he is able to sort of have that resolution of his perception where two things happen. He sees this whole sansara as part of that I consciousness, not different from him. And at the same time, when he looks at his limited edition, he doesn't see that as him. He sees this as an object of perception. So when he's seeing that, look at it. There are two principles coming here. When he's seeing it, all this as an object of his perception, what is he doing? This is what he is doing. It is an object of his perception. Then he goes to higher. So you have the principle of transcendence here. He's somebody who is transcended his state of existence. Then when he says Ahamidam, that immanence principle comes in. The Paramashiva is all pervading. So it's transcendent and immanent. And both these principles are now resolved in that Shiva consciousness of the Mahayogi who has got Bhairavapatti. So more or less this sums up everything that we have studied, but let's look at Kshemaraja because we are looking at it in case somebody watches it later on also. Idrisasya Mahechasya, the person who has this Mahan Icha, Yadyad Drishyam Bahyam Abhyantaram Va Tattat Sarvam Aham Idam Iti Sadasivavat Maha Samapatya Swangakalpam Asya Spurati Na Bhedena. That's what we discussed, that he doesn't see anything outside of himself as not part of him, because that consciousness is all pervading and he has established himself in that consciousness. Sariram Cha. So first thing is Drishyam Sariram, where everything, all that you see is part of the Supreme Consciousness. Here Sarira means the Supreme Consciousness. Then Sariram Drishyam. When you have the limited edition, there's an object of perception, object of your seeing. Sariram Cha Deha Dhi Prana Shunya Rupam Niladivat Drishyam. What you see. Natu Pasuvat, that word is adding. What is the Pasuvat? The Agyani. He says, I'm a man, I'm a woman. He identifies with this whole mind-body complex as the fulcrum of his existence. Pasuvat drishtataya bhati evam dehe bahyecha sarvatra asya mayurandarashavat avivhaktya eva. So he doesn't differentiate him. Avivakta eva pratipattir bhavati yathoktam Sri Vijnana Bhairave. And you just look at it. Aham iti aprithaktvena pativat pratibhasanat sariram deha di prana shunya rupam ghatadivat. So look at it. Aham iti aprithaktvena. He looks at the whole sansara as not different from no difference. Aprithaktvena pativat pratibhasanat, because he is the master of this whole universe, Paramashiva, and the sadhaka has reached there. Sariram, and then he comes. So first part was Drishyam Sariram. Second line is Sarira, Sariram Drishyam. That is explaining. Sariram, Deha Di Prana Shunya Rupam Ghatadivat. Then he is looking at his body, mind complex like you look at a pot. Pot is an object of perception, a phone or anything. He looks at this whole thing. The first line deals with Sariram, Drishyam Sariram. Whatever you see is verily yourself. Second line he says, you see yourself as an object of perception. Why? You have transcended. Drishyam evasya pashuvata drashtutvena nabhasate. And whatever he sees, he doesn't see as a pashu where he identifies with his body and mind and all that. Evam dehe cha vahye cha sarvatrevasya yoginah. And then he's identifying everything, which is internal, outside. There are two levels here. When he looks at that sarira word, is relating to that I consciousness, nothing is outside it. So far, this limited edition of consciousness is concerned, he sees that as an object of perception that is internal or external. And then, the next thing, Jalasya eva urmayoha, that we have done, that thing is that Vijnana Bhairava Tantra is again repeated here. Iti etacha bhokteva bhogya bhavena sada sarvatra samstitaha. That we explained, the bhokta is becoming bhogya. But there are these, a bit of mention about the, these Varadaraja, the Britti. That I'm just two verses and a couple of others. Let's quickly finish it. Drishyam sariratam eti, sariram chapi drishyata. Drishyam sariratam eti. Whatever you see outside yourself as an object, your perception, it gains what? Selfhood. Sariratam eti. It assumes you don't see outside world as different from you. Sariram chapi drishyatam. And then the limited of the sariram word here would mean that by body-mind complex, it's now drishyatam eti. It becomes an object of perception. That means it's separate from the drikshaitanya, the drashta. At one level, the drashta doesn't see the drishya as outside of itself. And then the drashta looks at his body, mind, complex, everything as a drishya, as a picture. At one level, he's including the whole universe within himself. Then he looks at his body as outside of himself. Why should he do it? Because these are the two principles, immanence and transcendence. At the level of that immanence, he sees everything as part of him. But when you come to the limited consciousness, we have to transcend this. Then he's also transcendent. And then he's saying, Drishyam, Hridayam, Tad Vijaniyad, Vishwasya Ayatanam Mahat. So, in the heart, he's established, and there's absolutely now no difference. He has that Ahmidam Vritti. At the same time, he's able to segregate his ahankara being identified with his body-mind complex as a non-truth. Therefore, it's just object of perception, is not himself. And other commentators are more or less the same thing they have mentioned. Therefore, I'm not repeating it, more or less. So we have 1 minute. Anyone has a question you can ask. So otherwise, we sort of any questions you have,
Yes, Swamiji, I have one question.
please.
Yeah. Uh, According to this sutra, where Lord Shiva says that this universe is actually as per my will, then doesn't it mean that this ignorance in human beings is also part of the will? If
Yes.
not, then why this ignorance is actually there in human being, and what is this origin? It's actually for which
That,
everyone was, yeah.
yeah. So when we discuss the second sutra, Jnanam Bandha, Chaitanya Mahatma Jnanam Bandha. So you can look at that video. We have discussed that when you have two aspects of it, that swatantra hani, that you have that the Shiva consciousness is fully autonomous and independent. So there are two things which happens when we are suddenly. I tell you what. Okay, how do I explain it? Let me explain it this way. In an everyday experience. So, like for example, a student enters a college. He has a beautiful aspiration, ambition that he's going to study this and that and that, and then end of the year, he's struggling to write his examination. That's a this color. It's an example which is unlike what we are going to discuss, but I just gave this. Now, this Swatantra Shakti of Lord Shiva suddenly becomes converted into Pancha Kanchukatva, veiling power. The power to create, which is supreme, becomes veiling power. It's very funny though. It becomes veiling power when that Swatantra Shakti becomes Maya, and it starts inverting and creating this whole sansara. Therefore, you have this Ajnana Bandha because you have two things appearing there. One is Apurna Manyata and then Swatantriya Hani. So it's like they say in Vedanta, in Upanishadic text is mentioned that the child who is inside the mother's womb for 9 months, he remembers all his past punyas and papas and decides that this birth I'm going to get liberation. I have suffered enough. He remembers everything. And then when he's born, it is said that the very moment he comes out, there's a lot of trauma. He or she doesn't want to come out of the security and full protection of the mother's womb. The moment he comes out, then he suddenly forgets all that he had discussed inside with himself or herself in the mother's womb. Complete forgetfulness, and then no memory of past lives, nothing. So this ajnana which is in us is a product of that maya shakti. And by understanding Sakti Sandhana Vishwa Sangharaha, Sakti Chakra Sandhana Vishwa Sangharaha, the Vishwa which appears real is because we do not understand how this whole game of the Maya Shakti of Ishvara has made it possible. You are very right. Our anger, our frustration, where Paramashiva is not there, where Vasudeva is not there, he is